Echo did not alert. He screamed. The German Shepherd hit the rear door of Danny Cross's patrol unit at 0309 with both paws, and a sound that Danny had never heard from him in 2 years of canine work. Not a bark, not a track alert. Something older and more urgent than both of those things combined. The sound of an animal who has identified something that cannot wait for a protocol. Danny had the door open before the sound finished, because 2 years of working with Echo had taught him one absolute rule. When Echo sounds like that, you move first and understand later. If something in your chest just shifted, subscribe to our channel right now and drop your city in the comments. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Danny Cross was 25 years old, with 2 years on the Ashford County K-9 unit, and one thing he could not stop thinking about. 18 months ago, he had responded to a domestic disturbance call that came through dispatch coded at low priority. The coding meant a delayed response window. The delayed response window meant Danny arrived at a situation that had already become something he could not reverse. The person at that address was a woman named Rosa, and what happened to Rosa in the time between the call and Danny's arrival had been living in the specific part of Danny's chest that does not go quiet when you need it to, since the morning after it happened. He had filed a formal complaint the next day, documented, thorough, detailed. A complaint against the dispatch routing protocol that had coded Rosa's address in the outer zone at low priority. The same protocol that had been coding outer zone calls at low priority for as long as anyone in the department could specifically remember. Captain Voss had taken the complaint. Voss had reviewed it, reclassified it as a procedural matter, and told Danny 3 weeks later that it had been addressed internally and would not recur. Danny had believed him. He had been believing him for 18 months, while running K-9 patrol shifts through Ashford County's outer zone in a navy blue uniform, with his badge on his chest, and Echo in the rear compartment, and the specific quiet of a man who has done the right thing and has been told it was enough, and has not been able to make himself feel like it was enough, not once, in 540 nights. So when Echo screamed at 0309, and Danny opened the door, and the dog went north into the tree line, like he had been waiting for exactly this specific moment, in exactly this specific location, Danny did not hesitate. He followed with his flashlight low, and his hand on his radio, and his boots finding the frozen ground under 3 inches of fresh snowfall that had been coming down since midnight. 40 yards in, Echo stopped. Not the vibrating, nose-to-ground stop of a track hit, the full-body stop of a dog who has arrived at the thing he came to find and is now standing between it and everything else. Danny swept his flashlight left. She was bound to a pine tree at the back of a shallow clearing, wrists secured behind the trunk with tactical restraints, ankles bound with a second, a torso strap holding her upright against the bark. Dark brown hair, 25 years old, an olive-green shirt visible beneath a field jacket that had been doing everything it could against 4 hours of falling snow and losing the argument by degrees. Her chin was down. Snow had accumulated on her shoulders. Danny was moving before he finished processing what he was seeing. Hey, look at me." Her chin came up, her eyes opened, and before Danny could say another word, before he could ask her name, or assess her injuries, or key his radio, she said the thing that stopped him cold. "Do not call this in on your department radio." Danny stopped 2 feet from her. "What?" "Your department radio." Her voice was controlled and precise, in the specific way of a person burning the last reserves of available heat to stay functional. Not panicked, not delirious. Operational. The voice of someone doing triage on the situation before she did triage on herself. "Do not use it. Not for this. Not for anything about me. Do you understand?" Danny looked at her. He looked at the restraints. He looked at the snow on her shoulders that told him how long she had been standing here in the cold. He looked at Echo, who had pressed himself against her left side with the immediate, settled permanence of a dog who had made a decision about a person and was not revising it. Sharing body heat with the focused, unmoving dedication of an animal who understood exactly what the situation required. Echo was not scanning the tree line. He was not looking for threat. He was entirely focused on her. That was information. In 2 years, Danny had learned to read Echo's focus the way other people read body language. When Echo was focused outward, the threat was external. When Echo was focused inward on a person, the threat was somewhere else. Somewhere that a radio signal could reach. Danny took his department radio off his belt. He put it on silent. He clipped it back without keying it. "Okay," he said. "Talk to me while I work on these." "My name is Leah Strand," she said. "Petty Officer First Class, Naval Special Warfare. I have been here for approximately 4 hours." She held his eyes while he examined the wrist restraints. "I was not abandoned here by accident. I was placed here deliberately." Danny stopped. Placed. This grid, this time, this patrol unit. Her voice was steady. "The person who made this decision knows that K9 Unit 7 sweeps this section of forest between 0300 and 0330. They knew exactly who was going to find me and exactly where I would be taken when they did." Danny looked at her. He read her face the way 2 years of this job had taught him to read faces under pressure, looking for the tells that separated real from performance. There were no tells. This was not performance. This was a person delivering accurate information in a situation where accurate information was the only currency that still had value. "Where did they intend for you to be taken?" he said. He was working the ankle restraints now, his fingers finding the mechanism in the cold. "Ashford County's processing facility," she said. "Their plan requires me to be brought in through your department's chain before federal response can be coordinated. Once I am inside that facility, there is a specific individual who has access to me." "What individual?" She held his eyes. "What is your captain's name?" The question arrived in Danny's chest before it arrived in his mind. Something cold that had nothing to do with the temperature pressed against the inside of his sternum. "Boss," he said. Her expression told him everything. "Captain Voss," she said carefully, "has been running a dispatch routing suppression system embedded in your county protocol for 6 years. The system selectively delays law enforcement response to specific locations in the outer zone, creating consistent operational windows for a trafficking network running through 4 warehouse facilities in your county." She paused. "We have 18 months of documentation. The financial connection between Voss and the network's operator, the routing timestamps, the reclassification records." Another pause. "And 37 complaints from officers and civilians in Ashford County that Voss's system rerouted and buried in the last 18 months alone." The torso strap came free. Danny caught her weight as her body released the tension of the tree and redistributed it into legs that had been locked in one position for 4 hours. She pushed against the pine trunk and found her feet with the systematic, willed recovery of a person who has decided that her legs are going to hold because the alternative is not an option she is prepared to accept. 37 complaints, Danny said. 37. She steadied herself against his arm. "Officer Cross, one of those 37 complaints is yours." Danny went very still. "The domestic disturbance call," she said. 18 months ago. The delayed response. The woman named Rosa." She held his eyes in the flashlight beam. "Your complaint is in our documentation. It is evidence of pattern in an 18-month federal investigation. It was never addressed. Voss took it, reclassified it, and filed it as evidence of his own system's effectiveness." She stopped. "He told you it had been handled." Danny heard his own breathing. He thought about Voss in his office 3 weeks after Danny filed the complaint. The organized, patient voice of a man who had been managing this kind of conversation for 6 years and had gotten very good at delivering the version of it that sent people home with their concerns quieted. Addressed internally. Will not recur. The specific language of a system that had learned how to use resolution as a lid. He had believed it. He had believed it for 540 nights. "Why are you telling me this right now?" Danny said. His voice was level, working hard to stay that way. "Because you are the officer on the scene," she said. "Because your department radio is the one instrument that puts me inside Voss's access before anyone else gets here. And because you filed that complaint 18 months ago, which means you have been carrying what Voss's system cost you for 18 months. She held his eyes directly. "You deserve to know what you were carrying and why." Echo moved. Not the threat posture. Not the track alert. The specific movement that Danny had seen from him exactly twice in 2 years, and that both times preceded a situation changing its shape before Danny had seen the change coming. Echo stepped back from Leah's side and turned northeast and sat down and looked at Danny. Not north, northeast. Danny looked at his dog. He thought about north, which was the direction of the county processing facility and the department's frequency and Captain Voss's administrative access. He thought about northeast, which was the direction of the state highway and a signal that did not run through Ashford County's dispatch system. He looked at Leah. She was watching Echo with the focused, assessing attention of someone who has been trained to read operational indicators and is reading one right now. "Your dog just made a recommendation," she said. "He does that," Danny said. "Has he ever been wrong?" Danny looked at Echo. The amber eyes were patient and completely certain, the way they had been certain from the moment he hit the rear door of the patrol unit at 0309. The way they had been certain every single time in 2 years that they pointed Danny at something that mattered. "Not once," Danny said. He reached for his personal phone instead of his radio. He looked at Leah. "Can you move?" She tested her legs. She found her balance with the specific, deliberate assessment of a person who has been trained to take accurate stock of available resources and is doing exactly that. "Yes," she said. Not, "I think so," not, "I'll try." Yes. The word of a person who has decided what the answer is going to be before her body has confirmed it. "Then we move northeast," Danny said. "Echo leads. You stay between us." He gave her his outer patrol jacket. She took it without argument. She zipped it over her field jacket, and she looked at Echo, and something passed between them in the way things pass between a working animal and a person the animal has decided to protect, wordless and complete, and requiring no additional endorsement from anyone. Leah looked at Danny. "Everything they took from me," she said. "The drive, the documentation, the physical evidence chain. All of it. Gone." She held his eyes. "But I memorized the core evidentiary record before I left base. 18 months of it. Because I always knew the moment might come when the documentation would not survive, but I would." "Then you are the evidence chain now," Danny said. "Yes." She held his eyes with the flat, certain conviction of someone who has been carrying this for 18 months and is not going to let a 4-hour pine tree in a Virginia snowfall be the end of it. Which is exactly why they needed me inside that facility before morning. Echo took one step northeast and looked back over his shoulder. Danny looked at his dog. He thought about 540 nights of carrying something he had been told was resolved. He thought about a complaint that had not been addressed but had been weaponized. He thought about Rosa. He thought about what kind of night ends with all of that becoming a different kind of weight. "Okay," he said, quiet enough that only Echo and Leah could hear it. "Let's go." Echo moved into the dark. They followed him. The snow kept falling. The department radio stayed silent on Danny's belt. And somewhere in Ashford County, a system that had been running for 6 years and burying the right thing under 37 administrative reclassifications, was about to discover that the 38th had memorized everything. Echo moved through the snow like he had already run this route 100 times. Danny stayed at Leah's back, close enough to catch her if her legs sent the bill for 4 hours against that pine tree, far enough to give her the space to carry herself, because she was carrying herself, and had decided that was not going to change. Her breathing was the careful, managed breathing of someone whose core temperature was still in recovery, and who was not spending any energy on pain that she did not have to spend. Danny recognized the mode. He had seen it once before in a training exercise, when a partner took a bad fall and kept moving for 40 minutes before anyone knew how bad it was. That partner had been fine. The moving had kept him fine. He watched Leah move and thought she was going to be fine, too. They were 300 yards northeast when she started talking again. Not because the terrain invited conversation, because she had information to deliver, and she was using the movement to deliver it, the way a person uses whatever they have available when the window is closing. "The 4 warehouse facilities," she said. Her voice was low and controlled, pitched for Danny's ears only. "County records list them as industrial storage. 3 of them have been operational as network transit nodes for 6 years. The 4th went active 14 months ago." She kept moving, each step deliberate. "The network moves people, Officer Cross, not product. People. Through a transit corridor that runs from the Tennessee border up through Western Virginia and into the northern distribution chain." Danny processed this while watching Echo's movement through the dark ahead of them. "And Voss's routing system creates the windows. Response delays of 40 to 90 minutes in the outer zone during active transport periods, long enough for a vehicle to clear the relevant facilities and reach the state highway before any patrol unit gets close enough to observe." She paused. "The network's operational coordinator built a relationship with Voss 7 years ago, before the routing system, before the facilities were fully activated. They started small, a few delayed responses here and there, testing the mechanism. Her voice stayed even, but something underneath it had weight. By the time the operation was running at full capacity, Voss had a financial relationship with the coordinator worth $240,000 across 4 years. $240,000, Danny said. Enough to matter, not enough to be obvious. She looked at Echo ahead of them. That is how these arrangements work. The number is always calibrated to be exactly large enough to be worth doing and exactly small enough to not require explanation. Danny thought about Voss. He thought about the office and the organized patience and the 2-word resolution. He thought about what it looked like when a man has been doing something for 6 years and has gotten so comfortable with the doing that the comfort has become its own kind of certainty. He thought about 37 complaints processed through a system that one man built and maintained and used as a filing cabinet for the evidence of his own operation. He thought about Rosa. "The 37 complaints," he said. "You said they are documented. Time-stamped, sourced, cross-referenced against the routing protocol activity logs," Leah said. "Every single one. The pattern is not arguable. The correlation between outer zone delayed responses and active transport periods over 18 months is not a coincidence that a reasonable person can explain away." She paused. "Your complaint is number 23 in the chronological record. It documents the specific routing delay applied to Rosa's address on the specific date, with the specific timestamp, with the reclassification notation in Voss's own administrative handwriting." Danny's jaw tightened. "His handwriting," he said. "His handwriting," she confirmed. He classified it as a procedural matter and notated the file with a resolution code that he assigned to himself. The resolution code does not exist in the county's official protocol documentation. He invented it. It exists only in the files he managed. She paused. When we found that notation, we knew the system was not passive. It was not a broken protocol producing accidental delays. It was a man making specific decisions about specific complaints and creating a paper trail that looked like process but functioned as burial. Echo slowed. Full slowdown, not a stop. The gradual deceleration that Danny had learned meant Echo was receiving new information and updating his assessment in real time. His ears were working, rotating slightly north, the motions so small that someone who did not know what they were looking at would have missed it entirely. Danny put his hand briefly on Leah's arm. They both slowed. "What does that mean?" she said quietly. "He hears something north of us." Danny watched Echo continue the slowdown into a near stop, head up, nose elevated, working the air above the snowfall. Not immediate, something that changed. "The county vehicle," Leah said. Her voice had shifted into the flat operational register. They would have positioned coverage on the fire road after enough time passed without a radio check from this unit. If my arrival at the processing facility was time-sensitive, Voss would have flagged the patrol frequency for the expected response transmission. How long before he flags it? He expected me to be unconscious. He expected the response to be a medical emergency code, loud and immediate. No medical emergency code means the situation is not what he planned. She looked north, which means he started repositioning coverage approximately 10 minutes ago. Danny looked at Echo. The dog had completed his assessment and was looking back at Danny with the amber patience of an animal who has identified the problem, identified the direction that avoids the problem, and is now waiting for the man holding the leash to arrive at the same conclusion. Northeast was still clear. North was not. "How did they take you?" Danny said. He kept moving, kept his voice at nothing. "Start to finish." She was quiet for 2 seconds. Not hesitation. Deciding where to begin. I had been embedded in the outer zone for 11 days under civilian cover. Agricultural supply contractor, residential address in Millbrook. The cover was solid. We had tested it across 4 weeks of background building. She paused. 11 days in, I made contact with a secondary source inside one of the warehouse facilities. The source gave me a transport schedule for the following 72 hours. I extracted from the contact point and started back toward my vehicle. A pause. They were waiting at the vehicle, not at the contact point, at the vehicle. Which means the source burned you. The source did not know my vehicle location, she said. My vehicle was parked at a legitimate business address 2 miles from the contact point. The people waiting at it knew my vehicle because they had access to the cover documentation. The documentation was filed through a coordination channel that ran through county law enforcement. She held Danny's eyes in the moving dark. The coordination channel ran through Voss. Danny absorbed this. He thought about what it means when the system that is supposed to protect an operation is the system that burns it. He thought about 18 months of an investigation built on the assumption that the institutional structure around it was neutral, and the specific cost of that assumption being wrong at the 11-day mark. "How many people know the full scope of your operation?" he said. "My commanding officer, 2 members of my intelligence team, the federal liaison assigned to the county coordination." She paused. "And Voss, through the coordination channel, which means whoever he gave it to." "What happened after they found you at the vehicle?" "They were professional and they were fast," she said. 2 individuals. The restraints they used are military grade, which tells me the network has a sourcing relationship with a supply chain that moves restricted materials. She moved through a gap between 2 frozen shrubs without breaking stride. "They took everything I was carrying, the encrypted drive, the documentation packet, the backup memory card from my field recorder. Everything physical." She paused. "They did not search the specific memorized record, because you cannot search a memorized record, which is why I have one." Echo stopped. Complete stop this time. The wait back, full halt that was not an update, but a conclusion. He was looking northeast, ears fully pitched, and he was not moving. Danny came even with him and crouched down. He put his face level with the dog's and looked at the same angle Echo was looking. He listened. He heard nothing for 4 seconds. Then he heard something. An engine. Not moving. Idling. A vehicle sitting somewhere northeast of them in the dark. Engine on, but stationary. Which meant it had been positioned there. Before they started moving northeast. Someone had anticipated northeast. Danny stood. He looked at Echo. The dog had not revised his direction. He was still facing northeast, but he was holding, which was Echo's way of saying, "This is still the route, but the route has a complication, and I am waiting for instruction on how to handle it." "There is a vehicle northeast," Danny said. Leah processed this without expression. "How far?" "Far enough that Echo heard it before I did. 200 yards, maybe more?" He looked at her. "They covered both routes." "Not both," she said. "North and northeast, which means they have 2 vehicles, and they deployed both of them, which means they do not have a third." She looked at Echo. "What is due east?" Danny thought about the terrain he had been patrolling for 2 years. Due east of their current position was the ridge trail that the county maintained for seasonal access. A narrow, unpaved path that connected to a private farm road that ran south to the state highway at the county's eastern boundary. It was not on the standard patrol map. It was on a supplemental access map that Danny had been given at orientation and had never seen referenced in any briefing since. "A ridge trail," he said. "Farm road at the bottom, state highway south." "Does Voss know about it?" Danny thought about orientation. He thought about who had given him the supplemental access map, and who had been in that room. "He was not at my orientation," he said, "but he has been in this department for 12 years. He knows the county." "Does he know you know it?" Danny looked at Echo. The dog had turned due east on his own while they were talking, without being given a direction. Without a command, without anything other than the specific operational intelligence of an animal who was processing the same information Danny was processing, and had arrived at an answer. East. Danny had not said east. He had described a path, and Echo had identified it. "He knows every patrol unit in this county," Danny said slowly. "But he does not know my specific orientation materials. He does not know what is on my supplemental map." He looked at Echo. "And my dog just went east." Leah looked at Echo. Something moved across her face that was not operational and did not belong to the SEAL intelligence operative who had been managing an 18-month embedded operation. It was the expression of a person watching something that they do not have a protocol for, because it is more accurate than anything a protocol produces. "Then we go east," she said. "East is harder terrain," Danny said. "Ridge, then descent, in the snow." "I have been standing against a pine tree for 4 hours in falling snow," she said. "I can manage a ridge." She held his eyes. "What I cannot manage is Voss getting what he needs before the federal liaison can coordinate a response. That is the one thing I cannot manage." She paused. "Everything else is just terrain." Danny looked at his dog. Echo was facing east, patient, certain. The amber eyes carrying the full weight of 2 years of being right about every single thing he had ever pointed at, in every situation that had ever required it, without a single exception. Danny reached for his personal phone. He pulled up the contact he had carried for 6 months and never used. The federal liaison number from the training seminar. The number that existed specifically for the moment when the county chain was not the right chain. "I am going to make a call," he said to Leah, "while we move." "Who?" "Federal liaison, outside the county coordination channel." He met her eyes. "Outside Voss." Something in Leah's expression settled. Not relief. Resolution. The specific, quiet resolution of a person who has been running a compromised operation alone for 18 months and has just found the one piece of the night that was not compromised. "Make it," she said. Echo started east. They followed. Danny's thumb found the contact and pressed call, and the phone rang twice in his ear and connected, and the voice on the other end was awake and alert and asking questions before Danny had said a second sentence, because the number existed for exactly this kind of call, and the person who answered it had been waiting for exactly this kind of night. The federal liaison's name was Agent Tara Kerr, and she asked 3 questions in the first 30 seconds. First, was the operative alive and mobile? Second, was the evidence chain intact? Third, what was the current threat posture? Danny answered all 3 while moving east through the snow behind Echo, his voice low and sequential, giving Kerr the facts in the order she needed them without editorializing, because there was no time for editorializing, and Kerr's voice on the other end told him she was the kind of person who did not need it anyway. The operative memorized the core evidentiary record before extraction, he said. Physical documentation was taken. The memorized record is intact, and I have a partial audio record on my personal device from the last 20 minutes. A brief silence. You recorded her testimony. While we were moving. It is not complete, but it is substantive. How substantive? Danny looked at Leah. She had heard the question, and she answered it herself, leaning close to the phone without breaking stride. Financial chain. Routing suppression timestamps for 18 months. Voss's administrative notations with the invented resolution codes. The network's operational coordinator identity and the payment structure. She paused. The transport schedule for the next 72 hours that my source provided before the burn. Another silence, longer this time. The specific length of a federal agent receiving information that is reorganizing the priority structure of her morning in real time. The transport schedule, Kerr said. That is active intelligence. 72 hours from last night, Leah said, which means 66 hours remaining. The first movement is scheduled for tonight. Where are you currently? Danny gave the grid reference and the direction of movement. He gave her the ridge trail and the farm road south. He told her about the 2 vehicles, north and northeast, and the east route that Echo had identified. Echo, Kerr said. My K9. He identified the east route independently. Yes. A pause. Then, I have been doing this work for 19 years. In my experience, the dog is usually the one who gets it right first. Her voice shifted into the forward register of someone who has made a decision and is now building from it. Stay on the east route. Do not deviate. I will have a response team at the Farm Road Southern Junction in 40 minutes. She paused. Danny, do not use your department radio under any circumstances. If Voss flags your frequency for the no transmission window, any signal from you confirms your position. Understood. And the audio record on your phone. Do not lose that phone. Copy. The call ended. Danny put the phone in his interior vest pocket, the pocket with the zipper, and pressed the zipper close with a deliberateness that Leah noticed. She knows the operation, Leah said. She has been briefed? She knew the right questions to ask in the right order. Leah moved through a gap in the frozen undergrowth without slowing. She is not reading from a script. She already has context. She paused. Which means your federal liaison contact has been in the picture longer than the call you just made. Danny processed this. Is that a problem? Leah thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. No, she said. It means the response team she is sending has not been cold on this. They have been building toward it. She held his eyes briefly. That is actually the best thing that could have happened tonight. Echo stopped. Not the assessment stop. The hard stop. Full weight back, head up, body completely still. Every instrument he owned pointed at a specific location 30 yards to their left, between them and the ridge crest. Not the vehicle sounds from north and northeast. Something new. Something on foot. Danny went still. Leah went still beside him, with the trained, immediate stillness of a person who understands that when the dog stops, you stop, and you do not make noise while you figure out why. They waited. 20 seconds. 30. Then Danny heard it. A footstep in snow. The specific, compressive sound of a boot finding frozen ground under accumulation. Careful and measured. The footstep of a person who is trying not to make footsteps and is mostly succeeding. One person, moving south to north along the ridge base, parallel to their route, but not converging. A sweep pattern, checking the approach angles without committing to a direction. Leah put her mouth close to Danny's ear. Third vehicle, she breathed. They had 3. They covered the ridge base as the cutoff. Danny looked at Echo. The dog was tracking the movement with his ears, the rotation precise and continuous, updating the position calculation the way a system updates in real time. He was not moving. He was not signaling threat engagement. He was waiting. The footstep sound moved north. Then it stopped. Then it started again, moving back south. A patrol pattern. The person on the ridge base was running a back-and-forth sweep, covering a specific section of the terrain, and the southern end of their sweep was approximately 15 yards from where Danny and Leah and Echo were standing without moving in the dark. Leah touched Danny's arm. She held up 2 fingers, then pointed south, then made a slow arc with her hand that curved east. Go south first, then arc back east around the southern end of the sweep pattern. Come up on the ridge approach below the patrol's coverage zone. Danny looked at Echo. The dog had seen the gesture. He turned south with the quiet, weight-controlled step of an animal who has understood the instruction and is implementing it without requiring confirmation. They moved south in a slow arc that cost them 3 minutes and 200 yards, but delivered them to the ridge approach below the sweep pattern's coverage, below where the patrol's footsteps had been moving, in the specific blind angle that Leah's calculation had identified and Echo had navigated without hesitation. The ridge was harder than north or northeast would have been. Danny had warned her. She had said it was just terrain. She had been right in the way that people are right when they have made a decision about what they can do and their body does not get a vote. She climbed with the focused, deliberate effort of a person spending exactly what the situation costs and not 1 unit more. And Danny stayed close without touching her, because the closeness was enough, and the touching would have meant he did not trust her to manage it. She managed it. At the ridge crest, Echo slowed and turned back and pressed his shoulder against Leah's leg for exactly 3 seconds. The warm, brief contact he used when a person had done something that warranted acknowledgement. Then he turned east and kept moving. Leah looked at Danny. He just told me I did okay, she said. He does that, Danny said. It means you did. They started down the eastern face. The descent was faster than the climb because the grade worked with them, and because Echo set a pace that told Danny he had calculated the time remaining and the distance to the farm road, and had decided that they could afford to move. Danny trusted the calculation. He had been trusting it for 2 years. He was not going to stop tonight. 20 minutes into the descent, Leah's phone vibrated. Not Danny's. Hers. A number she looked at for 1 second before she answered it. The 1 second of a person confirming that the number is what they hoped it was. Strand. She listened for 4 seconds. Her expression shifted in a way Danny had not seen from her in the last hour. The shift of a person receiving something they did not expect. When? A pause. How long has it been active? Another pause. Long this time. The specific length of a silence from someone who is processing a piece of information that changes the shape of everything they thought they understood. Copy. We are 30 minutes from the Farm Road Junction. She ended the call. She was quiet for 3 seconds. What? Danny said. She looked at him. She looked at Echo. She looked at the dark ahead of them on the eastern descent, with the expression of a person deciding how to deliver a thing that needs to be delivered. That was my commanding officer, she said. He has been running a parallel access pull on Voss's personal financial records for the last 6 weeks, separate from the routing suppression documentation, separate from the network financial chain. She paused. He found a third payment thread, not from the network's operational coordinator, from a different source entirely. She held Danny's eyes. From a county government administrative fund that has been making quarterly deposits into an account connected to Voss through 2 shell entities. For 9 years. She stopped. The fund is the county's Emergency Resource Allocation Reserve. Danny stared at her. That is public money. $218,000 over 9 years, she said. Public money, allocated through a discretionary channel that Voss has administrative signature authority over, moved through 2 shell entities and into his personal account. She paused. It means the financial relationship between Voss and the network is not just a bilateral arrangement between a dirty cop and a trafficking operation. It is a 9-year fraud against the county government. The people who pay his salary have been paying for both. The weight of that landed in Danny's chest and settled there. He thought about Ashford County. He thought about the people in the outer zone who had called the dispatch line and waited and waited. He thought about 37 complaints filed by 37 people who believed that filing a complaint meant something, who trusted a process that one man had converted into a personal tool before any of them ever picked up a phone. He thought about the $218,000 and the 9 years, and what 9 years of protected transport windows meant in terms of people moved through 4 warehouse facilities in Western Virginia. He thought about Rosa. How does this change the response? He said. It adds a federal financial fraud count to a federal trafficking and corruption case, Leah said, which changes the arrest structure, which means Kerr's response team is not just picking up a dirty cop. They are picking up the center of a 9-year criminal ecosystem. She looked ahead of them. It also means the network's operational coordinator is going to know within the next 2 to 3 hours that the financial thread has been pulled. Not just the routing suppression thread, the money thread. She paused. Which means the transport schedule my source gave me becomes even more time-sensitive than it already was. If the coordinator knows the financial thread is live, they will move tonight instead of waiting. Tonight, Danny said. How many people on that transport schedule? She held his eyes. 11, she said. Quiet and direct, the way she said everything that had weight. 11 people scheduled for the first movement through the corridor tonight. Echo stopped. Not a threat stop, not an assessment stop. The specific halt he used when they had arrived at a destination. The wait forward, ears up posture of a dog who has brought you where he intended to bring you and is presenting the arrival. Below them, 20 yards through the last of the descent, Danny could see the farm road, and at the southern end of the visible section, 2 vehicles, with their headlights off and their engines running, which was the specific configuration of a federal response team, arriving dark at a location they had been given a grid reference for. Danny's phone vibrated. Kerr. He answered it. "We have you in our thermal scan," she said. 3 signatures, 2 human, 1 canine. You were 30 yards from the road. Come straight down. Do not move laterally. Copy. Danny. Her voice shifted. The 3rd vehicle on the ridge base. We have it on scan. There is a 4th contact on foot in the eastern tree line, moving toward your descent path. They have your general direction, but not your specific position yet. You have approximately 90 seconds. Danny looked at Echo. Echo was already moving. Not down toward the road. Lateral. South along the descent face. The low, fast movement of a dog who has heard what needs to be heard and is already implementing the adjustment. He heard her, Leah said. He hears everything, Danny said. They moved south along the face with Echo ahead of them, covering 60 yards in 45 seconds with the focused speed of people who understand that 90 seconds is a number and not a suggestion. Echo brought them to a break in the tree line that opened directly onto the farm road, 20 yards from the southern tip of the federal vehicles. The specific break that avoided the contact in the eastern tree line by putting 30 yards of ridge and the full vehicle mass between them and the 4th contact's position. Kerr was out of the 1st vehicle before they cleared the tree line. She was in her 40s, gray at the temples, moving with the direct forward efficiency of a woman who has been waiting for this specific moment and is not wasting a second of it. She looked at Leah first. Assessment, injury check, operational read, all of it in 3 seconds. Strand, she said. Kerr, Leah said back. The evidentiary record. All of it. Starting now. Kerr was already moving back toward the vehicle. We have a recording set up in the 2nd unit. I need your full testimony on federal record before anything else happens tonight. She looked at Danny. Officer Cross, your audio record. Danny unzipped the interior vest pocket and produced his phone and held it out. Kerr took it with both hands, like she was taking something she had been waiting 6 months to hold. The 4th contact in the tree line, Danny said. My team is managing the contact, Kerr said without turning around. Your job for the next 30 minutes is to stand next to your dog and let the federal record do what it is built to do. She paused at the vehicle door and looked back at him. You made the right call tonight, Officer Cross. Every call, from the moment you went silent on the department radio to the moment you dialed this number. She held his eyes. That matters. I want you to know, it matters. Echo pressed against Danny's leg. Danny put his hand on the dog's back and held it there in the falling snow, and watched Leah Strand walk into the 2nd federal vehicle to give 18 months of memorized truth to a recorder that was going to make it permanent. He thought about 37 complaints. He thought about 9 years. He thought about 11 people on a transport schedule and 66 hours, and what it meant that the right call at 0309 in a Virginia snowfall had just become the reason tonight changed its shape. He thought about Rosa. He thought about what kind of morning follows a night that finally gets the accounting right. Leah's testimony took 31 minutes. Danny knew because he counted them standing outside the 2nd federal vehicle with Echo beside him, and the snow still coming down in the specific, unhurried way of a storm that has decided it is not finished yet. He did not count them because he was impatient. He counted them because counting was the thing his mind could do, while the rest of him stood in the particular stillness of a person who has moved very fast for a very long time, and has suddenly been given 31 minutes to stand still and feel the full weight of what the moving has been carrying. 31 minutes was a long time to stand with that weight. He thought about Voss. He thought about the specific quality of Voss's voice in that office 18 months ago. The organized patience of it. The way the resolution had been delivered, in the tone of a man who had delivered resolutions before, and had learned exactly how much weight to put behind the words to make them feel final. Addressed internally, will not recur. Danny had walked out of that office with both of those sentences sitting in his chest, and had told himself on the drive home that trusting the process was what a professional did, and that a professional was what he intended to be. He had been a professional for 540 nights. He had done the job correctly on every single one of them. And the correct doing had not touched the thing that was wrong, because the thing that was wrong had been built to survive correct doing. It had been built by a man who understood that people who did the job correctly were the easiest people to manage, because they trusted the structure, and the structure was his. The door of the second vehicle opened at the 31-minute mark. Leah came out first. She moved with the careful, deliberate steadiness of a person whose body has been through a significant night and is managing the inventory of it with the same organized efficiency she applied to everything else. Kerr came out behind her and went directly to the first vehicle and said something to the driver that Danny could not hear. Leah came to where Danny was standing. She looked at him for a moment without saying anything, which was not hesitation, but the specific consideration of a person choosing the right words for something that matters. "The testimony is complete and on federal record," she said. "The transport schedule is in federal hands. Kerr's team is coordinating the intercept of tonight's movement with 3 agencies as of 20 minutes ago." She paused. "The 11 people on that schedule are not going to move through those facilities tonight." Danny absorbed this. He thought about 11 people who did not know that a canine named Echo had screamed at a patrol unit door at 0309 in a Virginia snowfall. He thought about what the difference was between a night where Echo made that sound and a night where he did not. He thought about how thin that difference was and how much weight it carried. "What happens to the network?" he said. "The coordinator is being identified through the financial chain as we stand here. The payment structure that Voss used connects to 3 entities, and the Federal Financial Crimes Unit has been running the entity mapping for 6 weeks. They have a name. They have been waiting for the operational case to be solid enough to move on both simultaneously." She held his eyes. "The arrest structure triggers tonight. Both Voss and the coordinator coordinated, so neither one can alert the other." She paused. "The 4 facilities are being secured as we speak." Danny looked at Echo. The dog was sitting at his left heel, watching the first vehicle where Kerr was still in conversation. The focused, patient attention of an animal who has completed the primary task and is now running general awareness while the humans finish what they need to finish. "The complaint," Danny said. He said it simply, without the 18 months of weight that the word usually carried, because some of the weight had shifted its position in the last 3 hours, and the word felt different in his mouth now. "The 37 complaints. What happens to them?" Leah looked at him directly. "They become part of the federal record as evidence of the pattern," she said. "Each one is named, time-stamped, sourced. Each one is evidence that Voss's system operated deliberately and consistently to suppress legitimate law enforcement response for the benefit of a criminal operation." She paused. "The Federal Oversight Office will notify each individual who filed a complaint. Individually, by name. What they filed will be acknowledged as accurate, credible, and documented." She held his eyes. Their complaints were not bureaucratic casualties. They were evidence that a system was being used against the people who trusted it. That will be in the federal record permanently. Danny received this. He received it in the place where 18 months of the wrong version of the story had been living. and he felt the wrong version move over to make room for the right one. Not replaced, recontextualized. The complaint he filed was not a failure of the system. It was proof of what the system had become. The difference between those two things was the difference between a weight you carry because you caused something and a weight you carry because you witnessed something. And they did not feel the same, and they were not the same, and he had been mixing them up for 540 nights. Kerr came from the first vehicle. She moved with the forward efficiency she had been moving with since she arrived, but something in the quality of it had changed. Not faster, more settled. The efficiency of a person who has been building toward a specific moment for a long time, and has reached it, and is now operating from completion rather than anticipation. She stopped in front of Danny. She looked at him with the direct, full attention of a woman who has formed a complete and accurate picture of a person across the course of a difficult night, and is about to deliver something she has been carrying on their behalf. "Voss is in federal custody as of 4 minutes ago," she said. "The county processing facility is under federal seal. 2 of the 4 warehouse facilities are secured. The remaining 2 are being approached now." She paused. "The network's operational coordinator was detained at a private residence in Roanoke County 40 minutes ago. The coordinator's identity is a name you will recognize when it becomes public. And it will become public." She held his eyes. "The 9-year operation is over as of this morning." Danny said nothing for a moment. 9 years. He was 25 years old. 9 years ago, he had been 16, in high school, and Voss had been building a system in Ashford County that was going to spend the next 9 years determining which calls got answered, and which calls got buried, and which complaints got addressed, and which complaints got filed as evidence of a protocol that was working exactly as designed. He thought about all of the outer zone calls in 9 years. Not just 37. 9 years of calls. "Rosa," he said. Kerr looked at him. "Rosa Mendez," she said. "She is in Charlottesville. She relocated 8 months ago. She is employed, stable, building forward." She paused. "I confirmed her status before I came out tonight, because her name was in the complaint documentation, and I wanted to be able to answer this question if you asked it." She held his eyes. "She is okay, Danny. She has been okay for 8 months. What happened the night of your call was not the end of her story." The farm road was completely quiet for a moment, except for the snow. Danny looked at Echo. The dog turned his head and looked back at Danny with the amber patience that had been right about everything from the moment he hit the patrol unit door at 0309 to this farm road in the pre-dawn dark. Not triumph, not relief, just the settled, complete assurance of an animal who did exactly what he came to do and is fully prepared for whatever comes next. Danny crouched down. He put both hands on Echo's face, the way he almost never did, and looked directly into the amber eyes. "You knew," he said quietly. "From the first second. You knew where she was, and what it meant, and where we needed to go, and which direction was wrong." He held the dog's gaze. Every single call. Echo held his eyes without blinking. Danny stood. He straightened. He looked at Kerr. "The complaint I filed," he said. "The formal record. Will be reviewed by the Federal Oversight Board as part of the investigation," Kerr said. "Your complaint will be included in the pattern documentation as one of 37. It will be formally acknowledged as accurate, credible, and suppressed by a deliberate mechanism operated by a senior administrator with criminal intent." She paused. "That acknowledgement will be in writing, official language, signed by the Federal Oversight Director." Another pause. "For whatever it is worth, after 18 months. "It is worth something," Danny said. "It is worth knowing the difference between the two clearly." Kerr looked at him for a moment. Then she did something he had not seen from her in the entire time they had been operating together, which was a small, brief smile. Not professional, personal. The smile of a person who has been doing difficult work for 19 years and still finds, in specific moments, something in it that reminds her why she started. "There is one more thing," she said. She looked at Leah. Something passed between the two women that Danny could not fully read, but whose shape was recognizable. The shape of a long-running thing reaching the right kind of end. "The secondary source inside the warehouse facility," Kerr said to Leah. "The source that gave you the transport schedule before the burn." Leah waited. "We have confirmed the source's identity through the coordinator's communication records that we pulled tonight," Kerr said. The source was not a voluntary informant. The source was an individual who had been inside the network against their will for 14 months and had been looking for a way to send information out since the 3rd month. She paused. "The source gave you the transport schedule because they knew the transport included people who had been in the same position they had been in, and they decided that getting the information out was worth whatever it cost them personally." She looked at Leah steadily. "The source is being extracted from the facility as we speak. They are going to be okay." Leah closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. 2 seconds of a person receiving something they had been carrying the uncertainty of for 11 days and did not know they needed, resolved, until it was. Then she opened them, and she was operational again. But the quality of operational had changed slightly. The way it changes when a person has put something down that they were holding, without knowing they were holding it. 14 months, she said quietly. 14 months, Kerr confirmed. Danny watched Leah process this and thought about what it costs to carry the specific uncertainty of whether a source is safe when you cannot reach the source and cannot know. He thought about 18 months of building an operation toward a moment that could have gone a dozen different ways, and went the one way that required a canine named Echo to scream at a patrol unit door at 0309 in a Virginia snowfall, and a 25-year-old officer to make the decision to go silent on his department radio. He thought about how close the whole thing had been. "The contact on the ridge base," he said to Kerr, "and the 4th contact in the eastern tree line, and the vehicles at north and northeast. All 4 in federal custody," Kerr said. "The 4th contact came down off the ridge when the facility seal was confirmed." He made a call to the coordinator, and the coordinator was already in custody when the call connected, so the call was received by my colleague, who answered it with exactly the amount of information required to keep the 4th contact walking toward us. She paused. "All 4 are cooperating at different levels. The north vehicle driver is cooperating at the highest level, which is going to significantly accelerate the financial fraud prosecution." Danny thought about the specific arithmetic of the night. 4 contacts deployed to cover the routes, 3 vehicles, a patrol unit ambushed by a ridge-based sweep, a target positioned deliberately in a grid that a specific canine unit would sweep at a specific time, a plan built with precision by a man who had been building precise plans for 9 years and had never had one come apart at the canine step. Because the canine step was supposed to deliver the target, not recover her. "Boss built the plan around the assumption that I would follow protocol," Danny said. "That I would find Leah and call it in on the department radio and bring her in through the county chain." "Yes," Kerr said. "He built it around knowing how I respond." "He built it around knowing how any officer in your unit responds," Kerr said. "He has been managing K9 Unit 7's patrol schedule for 2 years. He knew the sweep grid. He knew the response protocol. He knew the processing chain." She paused. What he did not know was that 2 years ago, a 25-year-old officer was assigned a K9 partner who does not follow the protocol when the protocol is wrong. She held his eyes. He built a plan around an officer who trusts the system. He got an officer who trusts his dog. Those are not the same thing. And the difference is why we are standing here. Echo stood up from his seated position at Danny's left heel. He turned and looked at the road leading back toward the county, toward Ashford, and the morning that was beginning somewhere above the cloud cover that had been snowing on them for hours. He turned and looked at Danny. Then he sat back down, patient, present, ready. Danny looked at his dog. He thought about 2 years. He thought about every shift and every sweep and every alert that he had followed into whatever it turned out to be, and how not a single one of those alerts had ever been wrong, and how the protocol that governed his department had been built by a man who was counting on the assumption that protocol was what Danny Cross trusted most. He thought about the 40 minutes he had spent at that pine tree, learning what he had actually been carrying for 18 months. He thought about the east route and the ridge and the farm road and the way Echo had turned east before Danny had finished describing the path. He thought about what it means to trust something that has never once been wrong. Leah came to stand beside him. She was looking at the road, too, at the direction that led back toward Ashford County, and everything that was being dismantled inside it right now. She had the forward-facing composure of a person who has completed something large and is sitting with the completion without rushing to the next thing. 18 months, she said, not to Kerr, to Danny. The quiet acknowledgement of a person marking the cost of something before they put it down. How does it feel? He said. She thought about it honestly, rather than answering immediately. Like something that was supposed to have an ending has an ending, she said. And like the ending looks different from the inside than it did from a distance. She paused. I thought it would feel bigger. It feels more like something settling into its right place than something exploding. She looked at Echo, which is probably more useful. Echo's tail moved once. The single clean sweep of a dog, confirming that the situation has resolved in the right direction and that this, specifically, is what resolved situations feel like. The 11 people on the transport schedule, Danny said, are not moving tonight, Leah said, or any night through these facilities. She held his eyes. That is real, Danny. Whatever everything else turns out to look like in the daylight, that is the thing that does not change. Danny held on to that. He held it in the place where 18 months of Rosa had been living, and felt the two things exist there together. The cost of what the system had been, and the weight of what tonight had changed, and understood that both of them were true, and neither one canceled the other, and that was exactly what it meant to do this work. Kerr came back from the first vehicle. Transport for Strand in 8 minutes, she said. Medical assessment and full debrief at the Federal Field Office. She looked at Danny. Your unit will need to be processed as part of the evidence record. Standard procedure when a department asset is present at a federal scene. She paused. You will be given a full briefing before you speak to anyone in your department chain. Anyone. That includes your direct supervisor below Voss. She held his eyes. Until that briefing is complete, you say nothing to anyone in Ashford County about tonight. Do you understand? Yes. Your canine documentation will be part of the federal record. Echo's alert at 0309, his route identification, his independent navigation decisions. All of it. She looked at the dog. In 19 years, I have written canine commendation recommendations 4 times. I am going to write a 5th tonight. She paused. He earned it from the first step. Echo looked at Kerr with the amber attention he gave to people who were doing things worth watching. Danny looked at his dog and thought about a door hit at 0309, and a sound he had never heard from him before, and the single, absolute rule he had learned in 2 years of canine work, which was that when Echo sounded like that, you moved first and understood later, and how understanding later had turned out to be worth exactly everything that moving had cost. The transport vehicle for Leah left the farm road at 5:11. Danny watched it go, with Echo beside him, and the snow still falling, and the specific quiet of a farm road in Western Virginia at 5 in the morning. The quiet that arrives after things have been decided, and before the world has caught up to the decisions. The vehicle's taillights disappeared around the eastern bend, and the road was empty again. And Danny stood in the empty of it and let the night fully arrive in his chest for the first time since 0309. It was a lot to let arrive. Kerr came to stand beside him. She did not fill the silence immediately, which was the specific quality of a person who understood that some silences were doing work and should not be interrupted. She let it do its work for a full minute. Then she said, "The federal briefing is at 0900, field office in Roanoke. I will have someone drive you." She paused. "Until then, you are not on duty and you are not in contact with your department. You are with me." "Echo needs water," Danny said. Kerr looked at the dog. Then she turned and said something to the agent near the first vehicle, who produced a collapsible bowl and a water bottle from somewhere in the back, with the practiced efficiency of a team that prepares for the logistics of the thing they are doing. Echo drank in the unhurried way of a dog who has completed what he came to do, and is now attending to the practical inventory of the aftermath. Danny watched him drink and thought about 2 years and the specific arithmetic of trust, how it builds and what it costs, and what it gives back when you've been building it in the right direction. He thought about Voss in federal custody, somewhere in Ashford County right now, in a room where his organized patience and his 2-word resolutions and his administrative reclassification authority were not currencies that anyone was accepting. He thought about what 9 years looks like in the specific, undecorated language of a federal record. He thought about the $218,000 and the 37 complaints and the 4 warehouse facilities and the people who had moved through them in windows that one man had been paid to keep open. He thought about how long 9 years was. He thought about how many correct calls he had made in 2 years on this unit, how many times he had followed protocol because protocol was what a professional followed, and how Voss had been counting on exactly that for exactly as long as Danny had been on the unit. Then he thought about Echo hitting the rear door at 0309. He thought about the single, absolute rule. Kerr was watching him. "You are processing it," she said. "Yes." "That is the right thing to do." She looked at Echo. "I have worked with K-9 units for 11 years. I have never written a commendation recommendation that I did not have to argue for. Tonight, I will not have to argue." She paused. The alert at 0309, the independent route identification, the south arc around the ridge base contact, the eastern approach below the 4th contact sweep pattern. She looked at Danny. Every single one of those was Echo making a correct, independent assessment under active operational pressure. Every single one. She held his eyes. That does not happen without a handler who has built the kind of trust that allows the dog to operate at that level. Echo did not do that alone. You made that possible. Danny received this without deflecting it, which was something he was practicing. He had spent 18 months deflecting things, organizing them into the professional category, where they did not require personal acknowledgement. He was trying a different approach tonight. He was letting things land where they actually landed. "The complaint," he said. "The formal acknowledgement. When does it arrive?" "The Oversight Board moves within 30 days of the federal case filing," Kerr said. "The case filing happens this morning when I walk into the Roanoke field office with Leah's testimony on federal record." She paused. 30 days. Your copy of the formal acknowledgement will be in writing, signed, delivered directly to you, not through your department chain, directly. She met his eyes. "Boss does not handle this one." Danny almost smiled at that. Almost. Kerr's phone buzzed. She looked at it, and her expression shifted in the specific way it shifted when incoming information was significant. "The second source," she said. "The individual who was inside the network for 14 months. The one we extracted from the facility tonight." She looked at Danny. "They are asking to speak with the officer who found Leah." Danny looked at her. "Why?" "Because they know that if Leah had not been found tonight, the transport schedule would have run, and 11 people would have moved through those facilities." She paused. "And because the 11 people on the transport schedule included 3 individuals who had been inside the network for over a year. People who had been waiting for exactly the kind of night that just happened." She held his eyes. "The source wants to say thank you to the person who made tonight happen." Danny was quiet for a moment. He thought about what thank you meant from a person who had been inside a warehouse facility for 14 months, waiting for something to change. He thought about what the weight of that thank you would feel like, and whether he was ready to hold it. He looked at Echo. Echo was looking back at him with the amber patience that had never once been wrong. Not pushing, not directing, just present, the way he was always present, giving Danny exactly the space the moment required to make his own decision. "Yes," Danny said. "I will speak with them." The call lasted 4 minutes. Danny stood at the edge of the farm road in the falling snow and listened to a voice that had been inside something for 14 months and was on the other side of it now. And the voice said things that Danny did not have adequate words for, and did not try to produce adequate words for, because some things do not need the response to be equal to the weight. He said, "You are safe, and I am glad, and it is over." And he said it simply because simple was what the moment required. When the call ended, he stood with his phone at his side for a long moment. Kerr did not ask how it went. She looked at his face and read what she needed to read, and said nothing, which was the right choice, and she knew it. Echo pressed against his leg, warm and solid and present, the specific, undemonstrative contact of a dog who does not perform comfort, but delivers it with the quiet certainty of an animal who knows exactly what a person needs and when they need it, and does not require instruction to provide it. Danny put his hand on the dog's back and held it there. At 6:38, the snow stopped. It stopped the way significant snows stop in Western Virginia. Not gradually, not with the polite courtesy of a weather event winding down, but all at once, as if the decision had been made somewhere above the cloud cover and implemented immediately. 1 minute it was falling, and the next minute it was not. And the silence that followed was the silence of a world that had just changed its conditions and was waiting to see what moved first. Danny looked up. The cloud cover was breaking in the east. Not open yet, just thinning. The specific gray lightning that comes ahead of sunrise, when the sun has not cleared the ridge yet, but has begun to make its intentions clear. The light was coming, not arrived. Coming. Leah's voice came from behind him. He turned. The transport vehicle was back, idling at the road junction, and Leah was standing outside it in the federal-issue thermal jacket they had given her at the farm road, her dark hair catching the first gray light, her posture the same as it always was, direct and composed, with the additional quality of a person who has put down something they have been carrying for a long time and is still adjusting to the absence of the weight. "They stopped for a medical checkpoint," she said. "I asked them to come back." Danny looked at her. "You okay?" "Functionally." She came to where he was standing. She looked at Echo, who had turned toward her with the full, patient attention he reserved for people he had decided were permanently his responsibility. She looked at him for a moment in the breaking light. Then she crouched down in front of him, right there on the farm road in the snow, and put both hands on either side of his face, the way Danny almost never did, and looked directly into the amber eyes. "You found me," she said. Quiet and entirely personal, the voice she used when she was not managing anything. "You found me, and you kept me moving, and you got every single call right from the first second." She held his gaze. 18 months of an operation, 14 months of a source waiting inside a facility, 11 people on a transport schedule. She stopped. "None of it happens without you making that sound at 0309 and a handler who trusted what it meant." She held the amber eyes. "Thank you." Echo held her gaze with the full, level certainty of an animal who received acknowledgement, and held it without needing it to be larger than it was. She stood. She looked at Danny. "He accepted it," she said. "He always does," Danny said. "He does not need it to be more than it is." She looked at him with the complete, honest expression she had been building across the night. The look of a person who has watched someone make a series of decisions under pressure and has formed an accurate and permanent picture. "You are 25 years old," she said. "You have 2 years on a canine unit in a county where the system you worked inside was being run against the people it was supposed to protect." She paused. "You filed a complaint when you saw something wrong. You trusted a process that had been built to bury what you filed. You carried the cost of that burial for 18 months without knowing it was not your cost to carry." She held his eyes. "And at 0309 this morning, when every protocol you had been trained to follow said call it in on the department radio, you looked at your dog and made the only call that actually mattered." Danny looked at Echo. The dog was watching him with the amber patience that had been watching him for 2 years, in every situation, on every shift, with the steady and complete certainty of an animal who has never once in 2 years pointed at the wrong thing. "He made it first," Danny said. "You held the leash," Leah said. "That is not a smaller thing." She paused. "That is the whole thing." She walked back to the transport vehicle. At the door, she turned and looked at Danny one more time, the direct, undecorated look of a person saying something they mean completely and do not need to say twice. "Rosa is in Charlottesville," she said. "She is okay. Hold on to that." Then she got in, and the vehicle moved east toward the state highway and the morning. And Danny watched it until the taillights were gone and the road was empty again. He looked at Echo. Echo was facing east, toward the braking light, toward the direction the transport had gone, toward the direction the morning was coming from. Not scanning, not alert. Just facing east with the settled, forward-facing certainty of a dog who has finished what he came to do and knows it, and is ready for whatever the morning brings. Danny crouched down in front of him. He put both hands on Echo's face and looked directly into the amber eyes in the first real light of the day. "Every call," he said, "from 0309 to right now. Every single one." He held the dog's gaze. "Good work." Echo held his eyes without blinking. Danny stood. He straightened his uniform. He checked his badge. He looked at the eastern light coming over the Virginia Ridge, with the specific quality of morning light that arrives after a significant night. The honest, unsparing light that illuminates exactly what is there and does not soften any of it. And he stood in it without looking away. He thought about 37 complaints now in a federal record. He thought about 11 people who were not going to move through 4 warehouse facilities tonight. He thought about a source out of a facility after 14 months. He thought about Rosa in Charlottesville, building forward, okay. He thought about what it means to do the right thing into a system that has been built to bury the right thing. And what it means when the right thing refuses to stay buried. And what it takes for the right thing to finally find the surface after 18 months in the dark. He thought about Echo at 0309. He thought about the single, absolute rule. Some systems are built to make the right call disappear. Some complaints get taken by the same hand that writes reviewed and closed above them. Some officers spend 18 months carrying what a corrupt system put in their chest and calling it their own failure because no one told them it was the system's crime. The morning Danny Cross followed Echo into a Virginia snowfall at 0309. He found a Navy SEAL bound to a pine tree and recovered the truth from her memory. Walked 3 separate threat vectors through snow and ridge and farm road dark, and learned that the thing he had been calling his failure for 540 nights had been evidence all along. He did not do any of it alone. He never did anything alone. Echo made sure of that from the first sound at the patrol unit door, the way he always made sure, without protocol, without hesitation, and without a single moment of doubt about where they were going or why it mattered. If this story moved something in you, drop an amen in the comments right now. And tell me your city. Let's see exactly how far the truth travels.